You're listening to the Reinvest Podcast, where each Tuesday we show business owners and entrepreneurs how to diversify into real estate by equipping you with the tools and tactics to build generational wealth. Your hosts, Garrett Gatton and Seth Ciminillo. Hey, what up, guys? Good to see you here on another episode of the Reinvest Podcast.
It's good to be back. For some reason, it feels like we haven't been here in a while, but I guess it really hasn't been that long.
No, when you do a podcast episode virtually every week, you get a lot of reps in. Episode 124, and today we're going to talk about something I think is incredibly relevant.
The sun. It's good to have the sun out again.
Yeah.
Warm weather has been long overdue.
Yeah, when you live in Ohio, you get excited about a warm spring day. Instead of talking about the weather, though, we are going to talk about what changes have taken place in the real estate lending landscape in the last 2 years. And I don't just mean the increase of interest rates. Man, there's been a lot that's happened. And hopefully in today's episode, it's going to be quicker, but we're going to unpack, what are the dynamics that have created the lending environment we're in now? Do you even know what kind of lending environment we're in now? And then how can you avoid paying the dumb tax that Seth and I have watched others have to pay or have paid ourselves? So today's 25-minute episode could save you the ability to finance your next deal or not. I think it will be worth your time. But Seth, give us a little snapshot. What have been some of the variables and dynamics that have changed in the last 2 years when it comes to bank financing and real estate purchases?
Well, it's been pretty interesting. The banking world is like an underworld. Like they'll tell you an answer, and then you'll be like, oh man, I guess that's just how it is. And then you find out later that it's that answer for that bank, and then you look at another bank for the same deal, the same property, the same income. That bank sees it different. And so you find out that banks have what you call overlays, and it seems like they are ever changing, and it's different from bank to bank. And so, with interest rates rising and just kind of the market environment is perceptually more risky because of that, banks have kind of even changed their tune on what kind of products they're looking for. They're kind of, it looks like they're shying away. The regular bank, the regular lender, Fannie, Freddie, are shying away a little bit from investment properties. And so it's left room for other products to surface and other banks to have maybe some private portfolio products to have some creative solutions for investors. But it's thrown a wrench in our personal stuff that we've been trying to do.
Right. And there's a term called contagion in the context of the lending landscape. I'm just going to read this definition. The risk of contagion in banking, also referred to as systematic risk, is here defined as the risk that financial difficulties at one or more banks, they spill over to a large number of banks and then the whole financial system. Now, I wouldn't say that that there's a crisis or that things were at that level of like post 2009, 2010, but there has been a retraction in banks' appetites to do loans. That's been on the federal level with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, but then it's also been on a portfolio level, i.e. the loans that banks keep on their own personal books and then they don't go sell them in the secondary market. Both of these have changed, and you hit on a big one. Fannie Mae does not want to encourage or see people buy non-owner occupant homes through a Fannie Mae fixed rate 30-year loan. They have increased their pricing, and they've also increased their auditing of those types of loans to make it more strict. Commercial loans, if you've been following in the last couple of years, some of the bank failures that have happened primarily because banks were overly aggressive in writing commercial loans in 2020, 2021. It put some of them in a compromising position. And then it also kind of set a message to some of the other banks of, hey, we need to pull back a little bit. One of the other dynamics that happened is when some of those banks started to happen, humans are emotional. You see this in the investment side of things, the stock market, incredibly emotional. Some news related thing drops and you see a fluctuation in the stock market, not because, anything's in crisis, but people are making emotional decisions. Well, banks, as a somebody who has cash, you keep those deposits at a bank. Well, when you're starting to see larger regional banks fail, what did people do? They either put them at a local level or put them in the U.S. banks and the Chase banks of the world. So certain regional banks started to lose deposits, and deposits are the lifeblood of a bank because that's what they lend money with. So all of these things kind of had a compound and a cascading effect, which brings us to where we are now. Commercial loans, banks are slower to fund these. The lending restrictions are tighter. Now you're having to bring 30% down in some loans instead of 25% down. So that's going to slow things because you're having to come up with more cash to get deals done. We talked about Fannie Mae changing their appetite. But talk about the pop-up. It's not all been gloom and doom. Talk about the DSCR product, which we won't get into we've dedicated some episodes.
Yeah, we had some episodes on this, but there's DSCR loan products, which is debt service coverage ratio loans. So those are like designed for investors. Those have kind of popped up in the last few years, kind of in light of some of this. Real estate investing, the knowledge, the processes has become a lot more democratized over the last decade. And so now we're seeing the banking industry start to catch up with some of the products they're offering for independent real estate investors. It's no longer just the big guys that are getting access to some of these products. It's the people that are buying a property, a duplex. And so there's the DSCR loans. There's actually been quite a few lenders and banks that have come out with flipping products. So people that are doing fix and flips. I mean, there are loans specifically kind of designed around that strategy. And so there's been a lot more opportunity for some independent investors, but usually those products, you're maybe paying more closing costs or more points or a little bit have a higher interest rate. But now that regular banks are starting to clam up and Fannie and Freddie are starting to clam up, it's going to be where people flock to.
Mm-hmm. It's another alternative. And, behind that is it's been driven by private money getting hungry towards writing loans on income producing properties. So that's kind of a snapshot of where are we now, right? High interest rates, people are kind of tentative, banks are tentative about writing loans. Well, how does that affect you as somebody, an investor that wants to get deals done because there are still deals out there? So we're going to go over 5 pitfalls or considerations that you need to have in order to keep doing deals. So number 1 is get as many loans as makes financial sense while you have W-2 income. You want to expound on this?
So before I, became a realtor and started investing in real estate and all this stuff, I made way less money at my previous job. And these banks saw my W-2 and they were like, sweet, everything looks good. Here's, you're approved up to like $200,000 a year. I think that was my first pre-approval from a bank. I had no business buying something that was $200,000 at the time. I made not very much money. That payment would have been a little suffocating. And now I make money and I'm 1099, I'm self-employed. And I kid you not, I go to a regular bank to try to get a regular loan. And they're like, I don't know. I can't tell if you make money. I'm like giving these guys my tax returns for the last 2 years, the tax returns of all of my entities. They want all my K-1s. They want profit and loss statements from all different entities I'm involved in. And even then, they're hesitant. And the moral of the story is that you're going to have the easiest time getting loans for investment properties or a personal property while you're on that stable W-2 income. They want plain Jane stuff. They don't want any form of risk, essentially, when they're looking at your income.
Yeah, ironically, the more complex your financial situation becomes, the more investments and assets that you begin to hold, the less lendable you become to a bank. Because it's perceived risk, it feels complex and unknowable to them, even if you can clearly chart, that on your taxes.
And it's probably a bell curve at a certain point. If I had just like $100 million cash in the bank, I bet someone would just write me a loan.
Right. There's that awkward in-between stage.
There's that in-between stage that I'm at.
So, but we've had people who are thinking about a job change. Maybe they're wanting to make a jump into some form of self-employment, 1099 income. Even, like, for example, becoming a real estate agent, maybe you feel confident that your income's going to be, stable or more than what you have had, but the nature of documenting and filing your income on your taxes as 1099 really halts your lendability for about 2 years.
Yeah.
So the point is, if you have a job right now that's W-2, you have salary or hourly wages, consider making some purchases now before you change your income scenario.
To self-employment.
Yeah, because what you don't want to do is get 2 months into something and have a lot of cash in the bank, but now your income is documented differently and you can't get a loan done. So that's low-hanging fruit. We've seen it happen before. You don't think it's going to be an issue until you have that tough conversation. Pitfall number two, or consideration number two. Understand the risks associated with accelerating depreciation or showing depreciation from properties. So one of the beautiful levers on real estate that you can pull that you can't pull in the stock market is the depreciation of an asset and how that offsets the tax that you would pay on that income. And so it's a great, powerful tool that's largely unique to real estate, other assets too, but people love that. Well, when you show that depreciation, according to the Jobs and Tax Act of 2017 implemented by Donald Trump, that allowed investors to accelerate real estate depreciation, and which is great. It's time value of money. You take more depreciation up front to offset money today.
And essentially depreciation, I'll just kind of bring this down. The government has just determined that they understand that assets, houses, property, over time may become less valuable or deteriorate, right? If you have a structure, those materials are getting older. At some point, you'll have to put more money into it. So just the tax code and how our government has set this up to encourage people to buy real estate is that they will allow you to depreciate. I think for a regular single-family house, like an owner-occupant, is it like residential, like 32 years or something?
It's 27 and a half.
27 and a half. They let you depreciate the entire property of what you paid for it on your taxes over 27 and a half years. So every year, you would 1/27th, you would depreciate, write essentially that off as a phantom expense, and it will lower your taxable income. So that's kind of what it is. But we're saying one of the powerful things about real estate and some of the recent governmental, that Jobs Act he was talking about, it lets you take 100%. So all that 27 and a half years, or for commercial property, I think it's a little longer. It lets you condense that into the first year.
Yeah, a significant portion of it. And when you show that on your tax returns, that makes it seem as though you lost a lot of money that year. And when you show that to a lender, they don't get a bunch of warm fuzzies about then giving you a loan to a company that's insolvent. Even though it's a paper loss and you really didn't lose money, that makes banks feel some kind of way. So understand the risk of doing that. My point is, if you have some big purchases coming up in the next year, you just need to weigh out taking that depreciation up front, how that's going to, maybe affects your taxable scenario for that calendar year, but then also look into how that's going to affect your purchasing and lendability in the year to come. So again, a consideration. We did that. We had a mobile home park. We accelerated the lion's share of that depreciation. And on my taxes, it looks like I lost like $100,000 and, didn't, but the bank feels uncomfortable with that. Okay. Consideration number 3. It's more important now to have a deep bench of loan types and loan originators. We've said that before, but in this current environment, it couldn't be more true. So Seth, what are some of the people you would want on your bench to feel like you have a robust team?
Yeah, I would say the easy one that everyone maybe thinks of initially is just your local bank. I mean, local banks have great loan products. They have access to the Fannie and Freddie stuff. Usually they have some portfolio products. And once you get to know these banks and you've done business with them, they kind of let you in the inner fold. And these local banks oftentimes have competitive portfolio products that would not otherwise be offered to you somewhere else. And there's a lot of examples of what that could look like, but it just opens up more opportunity for you. And so, I mean, another one that we've talked about, and I think some of these companies are becoming more mainstream, are mortgage companies. Mm-hmm. And when we say mortgage companies, we're thinking of companies like Rate. They used to be called Guaranteed Rate, but now they're just Rate. Loan Depot, Cross Country Mortgage. These are not banks. They're regional or national lending companies. Rocket Mortgage, that would be like the iconic one that everyone would think of.
And typically mortgage companies have a fewer overlays
right.
than what maybe a local bank would, because their risk profile is different. Nobody tells you or gives you a list of their overlays because they don't want you to go somewhere else. They want you to feel like they can do the loan. But when you start getting different answers from banks, at the end of the day, it can't always be Fannie Mae's fault if one bank does a loan that Fannie Mae can take and the other one can't.
Yeah, I had a lender from Loan Depot tell me they are one of the few that have zero overlays. Whatever the guidelines are from Fannie and Freddie for you to get a loan, whether it's a personal home or an investment property, that's what they go by. A lot of times banks just have additional requirements to mitigate their risks on top of that.
BTW, I prefer to work with local banks in many regards, but there are cases for each of these scenarios we talked about. Local banks, mortgage companies, DSCR loans. You need to have different options because, you price a deal out a certain way. And if plan A doesn't work out, the deal would probably still make sense if you had plans B and C, but you need to have something lined up to kind of step into that gap. Number 4, readjust your underwriting and your expectations. So I think what I mean here is, now that things have changed, when you plug into your cash flow analysis or your pro forma to see if a property makes sense to buy, you've changed your interest rate assumptions because interest rates are higher. Well, there's other things that you need to adjust as well. And one of those is maybe bringing in a higher down payment, or maybe your closing costs are going to be more expensive with a DSCR loan that's just going to look at the income of the property and not necessarily all the financial and the tax return stuff that may be problematic for a local lender. So you need to update your underwriting assumptions with the different loan types that you would use. And then expectations too. Know that, if right now seasoning periods are a lot longer than what they used to be. When people were really aggressive in 2020, you could buy a house cash and then you could turn right back around and refinance on that property and do a cash out refinance, sometimes right away, sometimes as soon as 3 months after the purchase. And now a lot of banks are pushing that timeline out to 12 months. Yep. I've even heard 18 months.
Yeah. Which
is pretty wild. Does it pencil with a commercial loan product? So, I'm having to do this on a property right now. I have a duplex I'm in the process of purchasing. Was looking at doing a Fannie Mae loan. My financial situation was a little too complex for kind of that cookie cutter scenario. So now I'm having to pivot. Does this property make sense if I put it on a 20-year amortization and maybe I have to bring a little more money to closing? And so again, it's just readjusting those things, knowing it on the front end, because it'll help you get the deal done and keep, buying in this rate environment stuff. Last one. Okay. I'm going to let you hit this one.
This is a big one. So this is...
Didn't really know it.
No, yeah. So this is considering the impact of new entities transferring ownership into other entities and changes in your income. And what I mean by that is you think, and here's a real life example. So I'm a real estate agent, and I have a pass-through entity, an LLC, for my commission income. And so the brokerage would cut my commission income into this entity, and then the entity would cut it to me. And, it works. It's easy when you have someone bookkeeping. They can just bookkeep your entity for your advertising expenses, or, if you had to split something out. I don't know. There's a lot of reasons you might be doing it. If you're on a team, maybe that's the way you're doing it for your team. I don't know. But so you think, I'm going to leave that and I'm going to start a new entity for A, B, or C reason. It's the same income. My job hasn't changed. Nothing's changed, and it's just a pass-through entity. The commission's coming in, expenses are going out, and then I'm getting paid my commission still. Well, banks all of a sudden are like, whoa, you started a brand new business. And I'm like, no, I can show you everything. Everything's still coming from commission income, from closing houses. Here's all the proof. And they're like, I'm still looking at this like you just started a brand new business. And for that reason, I have been unable to get a loan just recently.
Nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed. My income has not changed. What I'm doing has not changed.
The industry is the same.
So that was a good lesson learned.
An equivalent, kind of another scenario within retitling. So my in-laws, my wife and I bought a duplex back in 2019 and bought it in our personal names so we could get a 30-year loan. Got a great interest rate on that. Put it in our personal names from a title perspective. And then we ended up titling that or deeding that to our business entity, our business LLC. And the loan still stayed in our personal names, but now it was, titled to our business entity. And that created some questions in the eyes of the bank in terms of if I was personally liable for that loan still on my debt to income ratio personally, which banks look at that stuff. They want to see what's the percentage of your income that's obligated towards debt. And so one of the things that I had to do was prove that the business entity was paying those mortgage payments for at least a 12-month kind of rear-facing look-back period. So again, when you are transferring ownership, you're deeding properties to different entities, or you're changing the entities that your income is coming through, that the bank is making an assumption that that's a new business, even if in Seth's scenario, it really wasn't. So again, these are 5 considerations or pitfalls you might fall into that we're telling you now so that you can account for that. Because once you've made the change in your job, or once you've you've transferred something into a new LLC, or you've taken the depreciation on your taxes, now you have to learn the hard way of what the implication of that means for buying your next deal. So hopefully this has been helpful for you and will keep you from paying some lending dumb tax.
As always, excited that you joined us for another episode of the Reinvest Podcast. If you want to learn how you can use your hard-earned capital to diversify into real estate, go to our website, reinvestcapital.us, and shoot us a message. Move farther, reach higher, and grow deeper.